how could it be that this announcement occurs between the release of the Her audio and the book tomorrow? How could that possibly be, Hogan?
Well, I think all of this could have been solved if the press showed the slightest level of curiosity as related to this president or his administration. We'd know a lot of the questions you're kind of throwing out there had they cared to find out the answer. I don't know if they just didn't want to or didn't care. And either way, it's not good. But of course, in Washington, D.C., with the air thick with politics, the I think it's pretty obvious in this tumultuous time and what's about to come out, the Her tapes, the book, as you just mentioned, doing something like this will obviously put the brakes on any reset that some journalists would try to do in going after and trying to find out more information. Now they're going to be scared of it. And I imagine stand down in a lot of instances when, in fact, this should only increase their level of questioning.
Well, so Dan, that's a good question. If this was done purposely to try to make him a more sympathetic figure and get less focus on the Her tapes and the book, it might have the opposite effect. Hogan says it should have the opposite effect. I think it might have the opposite effect. I think we saw for about 12 hours, even the New York Post paused scrutiny of Joe Biden and rounded up all the appropriate well wishes to him. But now the New York Post and others are looking at all the questions around this. And do you think that the press will or should pause scrutiny of Joe Biden because of this?
No, I don't think they should. Look, I will say this, like I'm as cynical as anyone, and I have been a huge critic of Joe Biden. If he was diagnosed with this after he left the White House, when they announce it is up to them. Good for them. Smart politics. Try to mat this down. If he had this as president, that is a different story. They did have an obligation to tell the country, just like they had an obligation to probably have him step down at some point in the last 2 years. But to me, yeah, okay, you're doing a smart political move. The guy didn't do many in 4 years, so like, there's an irony that is, afterwards. But no, the press should ask a lot of questions. I mean, it is clear as day, Mark. We've talked about it for a while that he was not well those last 2 years. And there needs to be a lot more public dialogue about this, the press, the party, everything.
Yeah. 106, please. Former President Biden posted on social media this morning, thanks to those who'd wished him well and Jill well. There's the photo of them, a beautiful cat. I will say that there's a few experts. The Washington Post quotes, the only expert I saw quoted in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, other major papers today, speaking to this issue of whether it was possible that the president could have been undiagnosed until just now, and that the diagnosis was at the stage it was at. The Washington Post quoted an expert saying, yes, in fact, that's totally plausible because the test isn't very good. Okay. No one I've talked to has said that. So now I think the question for the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, after a first day of respectful coverage on a Sunday, is will they now speak to the experts I've spoken to who say chances that this was not something he knew he had when he was in the White House are de minimis. Let's see what happens. Hey, want to be part of the two-way community all the time? Hit the subscribe button. Great video clips like this, plus conversations like no other, full episodes and more, always available on this channel. You got to hit subscribe to never miss a thing.